Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. I'm Yvonne Garcia, and I'm the chair of the Chamber's Women's Network Advisory Board and chief of staff to the CEO, chairman of State Street. And I also head global communications for the firm. While we've left 2020 behind us, we continue to find ourselves in this virtual world. That means it remains incredibly important for the Women's Network to support and connect women across the greater Boston business community. Before we dive into today's program, I want to take the opportunity to thank all of you who have joined us at the Pinnacle Award last month. It was such an outstanding event, so inspirational, and I want to once again congratulate our honorees. They truly inspired us and made us want to continue to fight and achieve more. Just extraordinary examples of women leading in the Commonwealth. We're very excited to also kick off the first Women's Network event for the year and look forward to many more great forums ahead of us this year. So now I'd like to take a moment and welcome attendees that are joining for the first time. Last year, we had an extraordinary number of new members and new attendees of our event, and we truly appreciated them joining the family. So for those who are attending for the first time today, I guarantee you it will not be your last. I encourage all of you to join in today's session on social media using hashtag BossBizWomen. We tend to trend quite a bit. And please enter any questions for our guest speaker in the Q&A feature of your screens and interact with each other in the chat. In the absence of all being in the same room and being able to speak with each other in person or raise our hands, we really hope that you leverage these features. And also for those who would like to share this with colleagues or friends that weren't able to join today, we actually record this session and it's posted on our YouTube page. It should be up by next week. So while this past year has been full of challenging news and pushed us all to look for remote escapes, today's speaker has the ultimate platform to tell the stories of people and places across New England and bring them directly into our homes. I am honored to welcome today's guest speaker, Nneka Nwosu, Faison, executive producer of Chronicle at WCVB-TV. Nneka, who's an extraordinary woman, I guarantee will fill the next hour with a lot of great insights that many of you will just really have a pleasure hearing about. She's going to discuss her approach to the leadership in the media industry, how she navigated the obstacles she faced as a Black woman on her climb to the top, as well as how COVID-19 has had an impact on the digital and broadcast journalism world. And with that, I'd like to give a huge thank you to our Women's Network sponsor, MFS Investment Management. We appreciate their support and partnership in bringing you all of this content and platform today. I'd like to welcome Rosa, Lise Amalu, Director of Corporate Compliance for MFS, to introduce today's featured speaker and moderator. Rosa.
Thank you, Yvonne. I'm very excited to be here today. On behalf of MFS, it is my pleasure to introduce today's featured speaker, Nneka Nwosu Faison, and our moderator, Cindy E. Rodríguez. Nneka has worn many hats in her television career and as a news reporter, a producer, and a digital and broadcast journalist. Today, she is the executive producer of Chronicle, the longest-running local news magazine show in the country. She started at WCVB-TV in 2013 as a Chronicle producer and quickly rose to become managing editor and now the executive producer. In 2017, she completed a fellowship at Harvard University's Nieman Foundation for Journalism, and in 2019 was named one of Boston Business Journal's 40 Under 40. Nneka has demonstrated a commitment to excellence, innovative storytelling, strong leadership skills, and a vision for the future of her industry. Nneka, we are thrilled to have you join us today. Moderating today's discussion is Cindy E. Rodríguez. Cindy brings more than 2 decades of newsroom and journalism experience. Through her years, she has shaped and inspired many young journalists in her time, teaching at NYU, Fordham University, Boston University, and she is currently the senior journalist in residence at Emerson College. Cindy is a leader in mobile journalism, hosting workshops on how to produce and shoot video packages on smartphones, which in today's world could not be more relevant. She has specialized in race relations and cultural affairs, covering immigration and demographics for the Boston Globe, also currently collaborating with Bay State Banner to develop an urban affairs reporting class. She is passionate at mentoring the next generation of journalists and focusing on bringing the issues of the world to today's forefront. Cindy, we thank you for being here today. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
And someone was going to do it, right? To unmute. All right. Thanks so much, Rosa, for that introduction. I'm so delighted to be here with Nneka in conversation to talk about there's so many interesting things we're going to talk about. Let's get right into it. Sure. Nneka, you are an Emmy-nominated media executive, and you were recently named, as Rosa mentioned, one of Boston's 40 Under 40. You've been an innovator and a pioneer in your industry, and I'm so thrilled to be here with you today. So let's start with what drew you into journalism, and how did you break into the industry?
Well, first, Cindy, I'm so excited to be talking to you today and so excited to be here. Thank you so much, everyone, for inviting me. What drew me to journalism, I would have to say, is that I've been a news junkie and a television junkie my entire life. I think part of that has to do with my parents were new immigrants to the country when I was born. My mom had only been in the States for just about a year when I was born. And both my parents spent a long time every day watching the news. We'd watch the local news at 6 o'clock and then the national news at 6:30. And it was a family affair from as young as I can remember. We all watched the news. It was a good way to learn not just about the community that we lived in, but also the new country we were living in. And then my siblings and I'm one of 6. We used to spend a lot of time watching TV, watching American Families, which was kind of a novelty for us because, inside our home, it was very much a first-gen Nigerian family. We ate Nigerian food. My parents don't speak English to one another. So we were very curious about what it was like in American homes. So I think in many ways, TV for me was a window to the world. And that's hopefully now I'm doing the same in my role as a television executive producer. So breaking into the industry, as you can imagine, is kind of daunting seeming to an immigrant or first-gen person because I didn't know anyone who worked in TV. I didn't know anyone in the business. And my parents, they really stressed education. And in Nigerian households, you have 4 options for careers. You can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be an engineer, or you can be a failure, because everything else kind of falls under that. I don't believe this. This is just kind of a joke in the community. And what that is, immigrants are just very concerned with making sure that their children are taken care of. They don't have to worry. And so they kind of pick these careers that they think are, a shoo-in for upper middle class life. So becoming a journalist was a hard sell to my parents, even though they are really the reason why I became so interested in television and journalism, because they're news junkies. They still are. So breaking in was hard, but for me, I kind of did it in the way that I knew how, which was to go to more school. So I finished my undergraduate at Princeton, and then I applied to Columbia University for their master's program in journalism, which is one of the best in the country. And it was an awesome experience because you're essentially a reporter for the year in New York City. Everything that you cover, you're right there next to national outlets and publications and television stations and the local New York stations. And that's, the number 1 market in the country. So at the time, Hillary Clinton was the senator from New York, Bloomberg was the mayor. So it was exciting to me to see these people that I was so used to seeing as a viewer. And now I'm in graduate school asking them questions at a press conference. So, and from there, I started working on air jobs. But I would say Columbia was really what helped me break into the industry.
That and your tenacity and your talent, your skills and all that other stuff that you bring to the table. I started laughing when you were talking about, what you can be, because for my mom, who I was raised in New York, in Harlem, my dad's Cuban, but not exile person. He came when Batista was in power. And my mom came from Puerto Rico. She was from the from the mountains in Orocovis. But even after I told her I always wanted to be a journalist, and even 10, 15 years into it, I would be on the phone with her and she says, it's not too late to go to medical school. Like, Mom, but you know,
I get
the
the
moms,
same. I
right?
get the same things. They've stopped in recent years, but
Okay.
you know, I think when I first moved to Boston in 2013, they were still saying, "Are your LSAT scores still good?" Or you know, maybe you could finish those pre-med requirements. But here I am.
Yeah, but and you know, and doing it well, right?
Oh,
So yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about what feeds your passion in the work that you do as the executive producer of a TV program that runs 5 times a week, night, you know, during the week.
you know, I think what feeds my passion is just that I'm naturally curious about a lot of things. Um, and I like meeting new people. I like talking to different people. I like traveling, which I got to do when I was producing for Chronicle. I'm now more in the office, you know, which is my house plus the station. So I think it's that natural curiosity that keeps me going, and I hope is infectious to the people that I manage and lead. Um, I also am just, I mentioned I'm a TV consumer, but I'm a podcast consumer. I'm a reader. I read books. I read nonfiction. I read fiction. I am reading and watching and consuming everything that's out there. And then I find myself trying to restrain myself from texting people on the weekends, like, oh my God, this would be a great idea for a show, or maybe we could do this. And I just think that this sounds so cheesy, but the world and everything around me is still very exciting to me. I really sincerely hope that everyone has that experience in the work that they do, because I think that excitement is what keeps me going and helps us to keep coming up with new ideas as much as we can every day, especially during a pandemic.
Oh yeah, yeah, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So many interesting things to talk about. Well, I'm curious now. I'm going to turn sort of in a different direction. Aside from your parents saying, you know, not too late to become an attorney, is there anything else that you know, just experiences that you've had that have left you either feeling discouraged or you know, doubtful about your the path that you've taken? And I'm just wondering, obviously you got through it. So how did you do that?
Well, I think that many of us, especially women, probably experience imposter syndrome. And I hope that I'm coming off as very confident today, but I experience it too every day. And what gets you through, oh my gosh, I have to think about experiences from when I started in the business 15 years ago. I was a reporter. And as you guys can see, just look at me, I don't look like your typical TV reporter. I don't think I have a commercial look, if you will. I have darker skin. I don't have straight hair. And these were challenges for me from the beginning. I always respected journalists. And when I looked at them, I just looked at them as someone who is smart and knowledgeable and telling me about the world. When you're looking for TV jobs, a lot of times it's less important, and this is unfortunate. I'm not saying this is everywhere, but it's less important how smart you are, how hard you work. And sometimes it comes down to, you know what, we already have a Black girl at this station. We don't need another one. We filled our slot, right? Or, you know, oh, we're not really looking for this right now. Or, oh, maybe you could do this with your hair, or maybe you could do this. And that happens to not just women of color. I know women of all races and backgrounds were constantly told what to wear, what to change, and you constantly feel like you're not good enough, right? So when I talk about this is something I talked about in the Boston Globe article that I wrote last December of 2020. I talked about an experience of trying to get an agent. I was in New Haven, and I was thinking my next on-air move would be to, you know, a top 10 market like Boston or New York, Philadelphia, where I'm from. You really need an agent to get those jobs. So I was talking to one, someone recommended me to him, an old boss of mine who said, hey, she's a good reporter. She's a hard worker. And I'm talking to him, and he had all of these great things to say. Oh, I've heard great things about you. And he kept going back to, but your skin is so dark. And that was kind of it. And he would say that from time to time. And yes, I've fought with people about lighting. I'm never well lit on TV. It's kind of constant struggle. But also, you know, yeah, I have dark skin. You know, I really can't do anything about that. But it was just something he kept going back to. And my feeling with, especially in TV, but in any job you have, is if someone can't be 100% behind you, right? Can't be so excited about you that he would advocate for me when he's pitching me to different stations and not be so hung up on my skin color or how I looked. If he can do that without being hung up on these other things, then he can get me the jobs that I need. If he's not going to be 100% my advocate or see me as this great candidate for any station, then he wasn't going to be an effective agent for me, no matter how well known he was in the business. So that was something that I thought, I can't be in television anymore. I don't want to constantly be judged on how I look. And then what happened was I kind of looked inside myself and realized I don't need to be in front of the camera to still work in journalism or to work in television. There are other jobs. People only see the people on TV, but there's a whole army of people behind them that get the product on the air. And having that realization really helped me. I spent so much more of my life cultivating this and not this. I'm not naturally someone who loved makeup as a kid. I didn't wear makeup until my 20s when I had to for work. So I didn't know how to straighten my hair until I had to for work. It's not a natural thing for me. So once I realized that I could still be effective and be in this business without constantly worrying about these standards that were impossible for me to reach, that was a weight off my shoulders. So I would say that's kind of how I got through it, just realizing that I could be more effective in this business behind the camera than in front.
Well, I just want to say that agent is despicable, and what he said is racist. And imagine trying to say that to a white person, like you have to change the color of your skin, you're too white.
Right.
Like, if you ever hear that, that is it hurts so much to hear that you had to hear that from someone, and how that must resonate or reverberate inside of you, because he said it not just once, and even once would be too much, but repeatedly. And
yeah,
you're a gorgeous woman. I don't know what that means, being too dark, but I don't think that you're too dark, and I'm sorry that you experienced that. And I feel so horrible knowing that. I mean, I read the article, but just, I don't know. There's certain things that even if you know that there are people with these views, when you hear it, it just, I don't know. I don't understand it, and I never will. But I'm glad that it didn't affect you negatively, and you are just as amazing on air as you do with the work that you do off
thank you, Cindy.
camera. So yeah, I feel like I want to find this person and give them a little
Send you the
scolding.
name off camera.
All right, but yeah, those people, we have to move on from those people. So and it stands to reason that race will come into the conversation, because this is what we're dealing with, right, in our society. Systemic racism that has existed since the founding of this country, that persists, and these structures that are here, and dismantling them is very difficult to do, but we can work on it. So getting into leadership issues. So your predecessor, Chris Sterling, held the position of executive producer for about 35 years. You worked alongside him as the managing director before being promoted after he had retired. And so these same issues will come up, I'm sure. What were the challenges that you had to deal with becoming the top boss, after, and perhaps maybe were you the first person of color, or the first Black woman to hold that position?
I believe I am both the first person of color, not the first woman, but the first Black woman, yes, and then the first person of color to hold the position. And I think that, as I had mentioned in the article in December, some of the experiences that I'm sharing are not unique, sadly, to my experience. There are so many, I heard from so many people of different backgrounds. who are in leadership positions or on camera. And I think a lot of women especially can relate to the experience of being a female boss and having some people who are maybe were your fiercest allies as colleagues, having some sort of having, you know, having a hard time adjusting to, I don't have a better way to say this, but a woman telling them what to do, right? I mean, there's something that's really turns some people off to that. And I would say I've had challenges with both women and men leading them. This is probably a surprise for some people to hear, but I'm the third youngest person in the Chronicle office. I know it's kind of crazy, but we have, I would say I'm more towards the average age now because we've had a lot of turnover, but I am still on the younger side. And that what that means is I'm managing, most of the people I manage are, other than 2 people, are older than I am. So that's a challenge in itself. I'm a Black woman. That's hard for some people when they're used to an older white male, as my predecessor was, as their leader and someone to go to. And that is challenging. I've noticed that people have, this is bad, but a certain comfort level in talking to women certain ways that they wouldn't to a man. And I would see it, especially when I was working with Chris. I would see the way that people talked to him and addressed him. And yes, he earned that respect. And you know, he is a great person and still a mentor of mine. But then I hear the way they talk to me, and I finally, in a year plus, can say to some people, you know, I know you wouldn't say that to Chris. I know you wouldn't talk to him like that. And it sort of, you know, pushes them on their heels, like, whoa, hey, but it's true. And some people don't want to be called out in that way. But, and it's not like the first time they approach me, I say it to them. This is after I've noticed a pattern and, you know, this constant like yelling at me or finding ways to sort of confront me when no one else is around. I'm like, okay, that kind of bullish behavior, you wouldn't dare do to a male boss or someone who was older. I'm not somebody who's easily intimidated. I think, but I will say that, yeah, at first, because of the imposter syndrome, if someone came and yelled and was mad about something and maybe was, you know, overreacting to something that they didn't like that I did, I used to go outside and cry afterwards. I'm going to be completely honest, because I would doubt myself. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe they are right to talk to me like that. Maybe someone said, I made a terrible call. That was a terrible call. We would have never done that before. And I'm doubting myself, like, oh my God, they're right. I made a terrible call. And then I would think for a while and stop crying and say, no, I need to own this decision. And sometimes when you're a leader, you make decisions people aren't going to love, but you're thinking about the greater good, right? So I finally started to stand up for myself and not just let them berate me and then go and cry. I mean, I still cry sometimes, but you know, I'm starting to really own my position a little more. It's still, I mean, it's not easy, but I'm trying to.
That's a hard thing. I mean, I think we've all been in that experience where we have to go to the bathroom and cry and wipe the tears away, and you don't want anyone to see you, and you know, and it's because of the frustration, you know, of and especially if you are the only, or what I call the only, or the lonely person of color. You know, you may not feel like you have the allies and people who can support you. And so you're really like dealing with so much on your own. It's it can really do a number on you and make you feel like you know, you should doubt yourself, and don't, because you're great. You're great.
I need you to just send me affirmations every day, and I'll listen to them. Yes, Cindy said I was great. I'm going to keep going.
No, you know, and you are. That's why you won those Emmys, among other things. But let's stick with the subject of implicit bias, racism, and sexism. Right? These are all things that are real. They're undeniable. And so we talked about this op-ed piece that you wrote that was published in the Globe. I'm just curious about feedback. What kind of feedback did you get from from others. I'm sure you heard stories from other people in this business of journalism, but in others, and just wondering, the reaction and maybe what response you might have given to those individuals who were reaching out to you.
Yeah, so I've heard from so many people. I think I still have 60 emails to respond to. I'm really trying to write back to everyone. I was floored by the response. And the Globe started this series, I think maybe mid 2020. And I was talking to them about writing something in the summer, and I didn't really know what to write. I couldn't really focus. And then I didn't really have clarity until November, and then the article was in December. And I heard, and it was heartwarming to hear from so many people of so many backgrounds saying, "I'm so sorry all of this happened to you." But at the same time, I don't want people to feel bad for me, because those were several, incidents, and there are probably some I don't remember. But overall, I would say I've had a great career and have worked with great people. There are just, still some bad apples in every place that you work. So I don't want people, some people, I think it was kind of like maybe a little bit of white guilt, like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Like, don't worry, I'm fine. But just make sure that hopefully it was educational for people. The hardest part was hearing from reporters or former reporters, many former reporters of color. I heard from this one man who told me he was Indian American, and he said that his boss just made him feel like he was bad at his job, so much so that he left the business. Now he's a public affairs official in a different state, and he goes on camera a lot. He's interviewed a lot. And he said the TV stations love interviewing him because he's so great on camera. So he really internalized a lot of the microaggressions and he told me racist remarks. And he said he still thinks, could I have done this? Maybe I could have done this. And he said, your article made me realize that I wasn't crazy, that these things were happening to me. And he's not that heard from a gay man who said the same thing. Countless Black reporters, both male and female. One woman called me and said, I'm thinking about writing my own piece. Here's what's happened to me. I mean, it's devastating. And it's sad that my story was not unique. I think that's the saddest part. But it's good that it made so many people aware and recognize that these sorts of things still happen. And my advice to many people is just, it took me years to realize I wasn't crazy either. And if you have that little voice in the back of your head that says, was that wrong? It probably was,
Yeah. And people are, some folks are really good at doing it in such a sly, passive aggressive way that you are kind of left with, wait a minute, did I? Yeah. So if the bells go off, I always say, put a question mark next to it and come back to it. I did want to also bring up something that your daughter had said. So in this piece you talked about, in this piece for the Globe, you talked about how your daughter was getting ready for a ballet recital, and she was very nervous, and she said something like, you had said, why are you being nervous? You have confidence. And she said, well, sometimes even fabulous people get nervous. And she's a wise child, like her mom. And as you explained it, you came to see that it's only human, for us to accept these feelings of vulnerability. That's a hard thing to deal with in the workplace. But I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you use your personal identity as a leader to influence changes in the workplace culture, and how you might encourage vulnerability and compassion and empathy, so that employees can feel like they can come to work as their complete self.
Right. Well, I wrote some notes for this particular question, so that's why I was shifting around, because I think this is such an important topic. First, I want to shout out my little Zoe. She was only 4 years old when she said that. And she, if you meet her, she's a fabulous little girl, you know, oozing with confidence. I always look at her and I think, oh my gosh, if I had had half that confidence as a kid, who knows where I'd be today. So when she said that, it was a virtual ballet recital. And I said, why are you nervous? You're a fabulous dancer. And she said, Mommy, even fabulous people get nervous. And it just was just eye-opening to me. I know it doesn't sound that, you know, earth-shattering, but it was eye-opening to me because I look at her, 4-year-old, now 5, as so confident, but then able to express that vulnerability, and which I think is amazing, because for Black women, I believe I said this also in the piece, we only get 2 choices. We get to be angry or strong. The trope of the Black woman, anytime, or maybe sassy is a third one, right? Anytime you see the Black friend in a show or a movie, it's like, we're funny, we're lighthearted, we're angry, we're strong, you know, the hardship, but we're still making it through. And there's very few, I think it's starting to happen, especially with shows like Insecure, where you start to see Black people as their whole selves, right? But most people don't get to see us as complete character. And I'm saying Black people, but I really mean most people of color, but I'm speaking as a Black person. That realization too, in addition to Zoe expressing her nervousness, and I'm just gonna kind of put out a trigger warning here, but I had a miscarriage in October. I have 2 kids. I have Zoe and I have Cassius. And I was pregnant with my 3rd, and I miscarried at the end of the 1st trimester. So I was about a 1/3 of the way through. And that was probably the hardest thing I've dealt, not probably, it was the hardest thing I've dealt with as a working person. And I still struggled with expressing that vulnerability to my own colleagues. I felt like it was important for them to know. I actually wasn't the person to share it with them because I, at the time, was just too emotional to talk about it. So I told my co-manager, please let these people know what's going on. And because I'm trying not to be ashamed of it, because after sharing that I had a miscarriage, friends were telling me about their own stories, my sister-in-law, my mother, you know, people who had never told me these things before. So when that happened, I discovered it was happening on a Monday. I was supposed to have a procedure on Wednesday. Told my boss, you know what? Maybe I could work from home Tuesday because I'll be home, and then the procedure is not till Wednesday. Then Tuesday I said, I don't think I can work. And then I said, maybe I can work from home Thursday, and then I'll come in on Friday. And then he said, Nneka, just take the week off. Like, what is wrong? Not what is wrong with you, but really just, you're going through something very serious. Take the week off. And it was at that moment that I realized, wow, I'm allowed to take care of myself. I don't have to always be strong. Just like Zoe said, you know, I don't always have to be fabulous, right? So after that, I took that direction from my boss, and I've tried to really give the same freedoms to my staff. So for example, we were given these parental days. If you have childcare issues in the pandemic, you can take these days off. You don't have to use your vacation days, a certain number of days you can use. And I told my staff about this, but people were afraid to use it because they didn't want it to look like they were, I don't know what they didn't want it to look like, but they were for some reason afraid to use these days. After I had the miscarriage, I had a day where I didn't have childcare. I said to folks, hey, guys, I have to take Friday off. I don't have childcare that day. And one of my staff members said, wow, I can't believe you're telling people about this. Thank you, because I actually have a childcare issue in 2 weeks. And seeing you take this day, you know, seeing the boss take this day makes me feel comfortable taking this day. So here are my four tips for bosses for allowing people to bring their whole selves and also their vulnerable selves to the workplace. I would say lead by example. I didn't realize how much me being open and honest with people about my own personal struggles or, you know, my childcare struggles would make them more comfortable. You know, I like to act like I have it all together all the time, and seeing, oh, wow, even Nneka needs childcare help, you know, needs to take this benefit. I can take it too. So I would say lead by example. The next is to watch what you say. I have so many mommy friends who have had bosses say to other people, oh, I'd rather have a staff of single people with no kids, or, oh, this person's always taking time off to take care of her kids. You say that type of stuff, it gets around. So I would, that'd be my second point, is to watch what you say. And recognize that people are human. Before the pandemic, when I took over this role, I told people, I would rather you just tell me you're taking a day, a personal day, a mental health day, than to lie and say that you're sick. I think that's even more important now that we're dealing with the coronavirus, and then people took me up on it. One person, they'll openly say, I'm taking a mental health day. And that's fine, right? I'd rather them do that than say, I'm sick, and just being completely honest that sometimes you just can't deal and you need a day to yourself, or just to get things done around your house. And then the fourth would be confidentiality. If someone goes to you with something very personal, which people are having to do now more with coronavirus, because we still go to the office and sometimes we have to share information. Oh, I might have come in contact with this and that and the other. Maintaining confidentiality, because then people aren't going to be comfortable telling you things when it's important. So those are my 4 points.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So getting into the things you've been able to accomplish, among the many things that you've accomplished during your time at Chronicle, you have been, people think of it as this is a show for older people. That was, the way it used to be. But then under your leadership, the viewership has changed dramatically. It's shifted by double digits in the 25 to 50-year-old demographic. So tell us what the secret was. How did you do this?
I would like to think that it was all me, but no, it was not. Part of it was that people were home during the pandemic, so they had time to watch TV. So between October of 19 and October of 2020, we increased by 10% in the 25 to 54 demographic. In general, most of our viewers do tend to be older. If you look at the overall number, we're still skewing older. However, most television skews older, but I still think we were able to have that growth last year. It has dipped a tiny bit this year because our competitor is Jeopardy, and as you guys know, unfortunately, they lost their host. So there's a little bit of curiosity right now with Jeopardy. Every week or every day they have different hosts, so it's kind of exciting. So it's a little bit, I would say it's more flat this year, but we expect that to change. And I think that the growth was really a few things. One, like I said, people were home, but two, I think we really started to think about what that 25 to 54-year-old viewer is looking for. More of our staff is in that range now. That wasn't the case a few years ago. We've hired, I helped hire our first Latinx producer. We have probably the most diverse staff in the building, not the biggest, but the most diverse, per capita. I think that helps as far as the stories that we're finding, and people are just kind of producing differently. We're also very much more conscious of the people we include in our stories. We now, whenever we can, especially a story that's shot in the Boston area, we can't do a story without a person of color in it. I don't know if that was always a prior. I'm not saying that we didn't try that before, or that my predecessors didn't try it. I think they did, but in the past, it's easy to say, I didn't find them. Sorry, I didn't find them. But I kind of don't accept it. I'm like, well, you have to just try harder. They're everywhere. And now that we live in this virtual world, you can find experts and people to talk to all over the world. So saying we couldn't hire a person of color, we couldn't find a person of color to interview, you just have to try harder. And some producers will even say, I have a show of all these people. I'm going to reach out to this PR person because they might know a chef of color or a female chef or something. Because not only is our staff more aware of it, and I think that's the culture within our office, but the viewers are more aware. Viewers will write and say, you did a show with all male chefs. We might have had ethnic diversity, but they'll say, where are the women? And that's happened before. So I think people are more aware, our staff is more aware, our staff is more diverse. I would say also, you think about, unfortunately, we did have a reputation of being old, white, and wealthy, right? I am none of those things. So how can I produce a show, right? That skews in that way. I think also when we do travel, we do a lot of travel shows or restaurant shows. We're not just going to the super duper expensive places that me and most of our producers can't afford to eat in. We're trying to be more inclusive in that way too, because the 25, 30, 40-year-olds, we don't have that same disposable income, right? As our the older generations. So we're just having those conversations a lot more. We produced an entire show in August about Black restaurants. We only included restaurants of color. I know I'm talking a lot about restaurants. We do more than that. But we did that then because there was a report that came out that restaurants of color were struggling at a much higher rate than others. And yeah, we got some flack from viewers who said, well, why would you do a show just on Black restaurants? What about a show on, you wouldn't do one on white restaurants? Well, that was the first 38 years of Chronicle, right? So you want to see a show like that, it's literally every other show. So I think we're just more aware, and that's the culture of it. And I've heard from other people, other colleagues in the building who've said, I've noticed that you guys have been doing this. And I hope that's one of my legacies, is just getting people to think differently about what an expert looks like, what a story of a middle-class mom struggling with homeschooling. We don't always have to just go to the wealthy white suburbs. There are other moms that look like me who are going through that same struggle. So I think that the culture and the thinking in that way has changed. And I hope that's why the viewership has grown.
I'm sure that has a great deal to do with it. And, and just having a boss who is of different background, you're going to, hopefully that permeates with your staff. Because I've worked in newsrooms, mostly white leadership. I did have the fortunate experience of being hired by my former managing editor at the Boston Globe, was the editor of the Denver Post, and he hired me to be a columnist. And he's African American, Greg Moore, and it was very different. The newsroom experience, the culture, and I'm not saying we didn't have our pockets of folks who had certain views, but you would turn the pages of the newspaper, and it was a very different kind of newspaper because of the people that he hired, what he promoted. And so on. So I'm sure your influence has a lot to do with that. You've previously discussed in interviews the difference between equity and equality, and why equity matters. So can you talk a little bit about the difference and how you incorporate equity into your leadership style?
Sure. So the meme or the picture that I reference when I talk about equity and equality is this picture of three people trying to look over a fence. And one is a tall person, one is medium height, and one is short. And they're all given a box, the same size box. Well, the tall person doesn't need the same size box as the really, really short person, right? That would be equality. Everyone gets the same thing, regardless of your need. That's equality. But equity is recognizing, hey, the super tall guy, he can already see over the fence. He doesn't need a box. But this guy who's medium height, he might need one box. And then the really short guy, he might need two boxes. So that would be equity, right? And then once you do that, they're all on the same level. And that's equity. And I think the way it comes in, at least in our newsroom or our office, is, a person who has 30 years of experience producing content for television doesn't need me to hold their hand or really help them with pitching ideas, helping them figure out who to talk to, how they should organize their show. They've been doing this job longer than I've been alive in some cases. So giving them the freedom and trust, knowing that they can handle it, we do that. We don't treat them the same way as someone who is still maybe the first within 10 years of their career and still trying to find their voice as a writer and a producer. They might need more help from me and my managing editor to find the right interviews and story structure and putting it together. And then what happens is, in the end, you can't tell who produced what show, because the more experienced person doesn't need as much, day-to-day help, but our less experienced folks might need that. But to the viewer, it should all look the same. And that's really the difference, at least how it plays out in our office, is just investing and giving additional resources and additional training to maybe some of your younger folks.
Great, thank you. Boy, we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to jump into some questions from the audience here. So let's see, you're going to see my eyeball very.
That's okay.
Here's one question. Okay. So as you mentioned, when being promoted in a company to now be some of your former peers and boss, any advice on how to approach that relationship and ensure that you are seen as their leader and get respect?
Oh gosh, that's still a struggle of mine, because I am just, I don't know if this is a female thing, but I still want to be liked. What I have to remind myself is, and I think I'm still liked. I'm not trying to say I'm, a hard edge boss or something, but you want to be liked, but I can't be their friends in the same way that I used to be. And that's hard. So I'm still struggling with that. I think it's much harder to be promoted within and be a boss than to go somewhere else as a boss. And commanding their respect this is going to sound bad, but sometimes you have to have a hard heart-to-heart conversation. I had to have a conversation with someone last year. She was not comfortable. She's someone I kind of came up with, and I don't think she was comfortable with me as her manager, but I also don't know if I was comfortable managing her. And one day she kind of, cocked a little bit of attitude, but it had happened before. And I said, do you want to talk about something? So this was pre-pandemic. So we closed the door, and she kind of just expressed her frustrations with me. I expressed my frustrations with managing her. And that was, we kind of had a very honest, hard conversation. And I've worked this year to really establish myself as, I'm your manager. I'm advocating for you. I'm not, you need me. You need me as your boss. I'm the person that's going and negotiating your salary. So, I sometimes you just have to hash it out, and it's not easy. And you're probably not going to be as close to some people as you were in that way. You're not going to be going to lunch with them. It's a lonely life sometimes, but you need to establish that boundary sometimes to be seen as their leader.
Good, understandable. Do you think that news organizations, we've had this reckoning of sorts, and there have been some changes in all kinds of industries, but do you think that news organizations are paying lip service to issues of equity and reporting fairly, specifically on issues of concern to the Black and BIPOC communities? And from whatever perspective, I don't expect you to give, that's a huge question, but
oh gosh, yeah.
What's your sense of are these real changes, or are they superficial and not long lasting?
Oh gosh, I hope they're not superficial. I can't tell yet, but I really hope they're not. I've noticed, even as I think you need more people. I'm not trying to say hire more people like me, but I think you do need more people like me. And I don't just mean Black women, I mean BIPOC folks, I mean LGBTQI, I mean so many different voices need to be in the room. I hear from a lot of the employees of color, not only in my department, but in others, who say, I have to keep constantly pitching this story, or I have to keep constantly mentioning how important this is, what all the attacks, for example, that have been happening with Asian people across the country. Keep you have to work that much harder. But I also feel like people want to be better. They're still not there. You still have to pitch, you still have to shout and jump around. But I think the newsrooms want to be better, and they need more people like us to bring those stories, because we are going to see them. We are going to know how important they are. I really hope they're not paying lip service. I really do. I know they're all coming out with statements, we support our Asian American friends, Black Lives Matter. I really hope it's not just them talking, and maybe time will tell. I know that's a cliche, but
Time will tell, and I guess we just have to keep organizing, and in whatever way, in our own organizations that we work in, and to put pressure, but also the public,
yeah.
So that's great that you get calls like that you get calls from people saying, this is great that you're going to different communities, that you're exploring these issues.
And it's exhausting for people of color to be the one in the room constantly saying these things and constantly fighting for these stories. And hopefully it won't always be like this, but I think this is our moment to do it. So I get exhausted too, but I'm like, no, I'm here. This is important.
Yeah, and whenever I hear, I work with young people, with students at Emerson College, and whenever I hear them saying, well, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, it's like, okay, I'm older than you, so I'm tired. But, if you're tired, you got to take a break, self-care, do what you need to do, but then come back, because we need you. We need everybody, all hands on deck, as we say in journalism, stealing that phrase from people who used to work on ships. But we need all hands on deck working on this, because it doesn't work. And we need the allies as well. So, because it is exhausting, to be the one who always has to speak up. And, so if other people do see it, maybe maybe you can speak up, not to be the person to always speak first. You want to make sure that you're being sensitive in, in Black spaces and in other spaces. But yeah, definitely speak up and speak out, because, and same thing for women's issues, right? We have to make sure that we're supporting one another. I saw a couple of other questions, but I think we've mostly dealt with that. So if there are any other questions from the audience, just put it in the chat. There is one other question here. This is a lighthearted one. Do you have a favorite story that you've told on Chronicle, a favorite segment?
Yes, I like this question. Let's see, what year was it? I think it was December 2016. Actually, it aired on my daughter's first birthday. I did this show on Malaga Island, which is this island off of Maine that in the late 1800s became a haven for interracial couples. So the legend is that a slave on a ship with his master, there was a shipwreck. The slave saved his master. In exchange, the master gave him his freedom, gave him some money, and with the money, this slave, Benjamin Darling, bought an island, because back then islands weren't desired. So you could buy islands, right? They weren't that expensive. He married a white woman. They had children. Those children married other people. People moved to the island, and it became kind of, for 50, 60 years, this interracial island. And some people looked like me, some people looked like Cindy, some people were very, very, very pale, right? Because there was kind of all this mixing. And then when Maine decided in the early 20th century that they wanted to start promoting the state for tourism, what they did not want is a bunch of tourists coming up the coast and seeing a bunch of mixed race people living together. So they evicted them from the island. They exhumed the bodies that were buried in the cemetery on the island. They committed some of the people to institutions, thinking, oh, if you're living this life, you must be crazy, right? It was just, the story is just fascinating, insane, crazy. So someone pitched it to my bosses, oh gosh, probably around the 2010. I didn't work at Chronicle at the time. And my old managing editor, Susan Sloan, she holds on to everything. So one day she gave me this article. She's like, oh, or an email or something. And she's like, oh, I think you'd be interested in this. I got it so long ago. It's from a white woman who discovered that she was a descendant of this slave. And if you meet this woman, it was just fascinating. You wouldn't think she was a descendant of him. And then I found her cousin, who was a black woman. These two descended from the same. It was just a great story. Such an American story too. So my bosses at first didn't think I had enough for a half-hour show. Again, this is also the advocating for stories, right? But my coworker, Shayna Seymour, our anchor, she was also interested in the story. And we kind of pushed for it. And then I was up in Maine working on another story. And then I kind of snuck off to do this one story. And then I just promised them, you just give me a few more days to shoot, I'll have a half hour. And we did. And it was just still one of my proudest moments because I fought for the story. I thought it was really important to tell. And it was something that a little known part of New England history.
Wow, that sounds so interesting. Like I want to look that up and watch it. There's so much untold history in the Boston area. So yeah, those are that's gold. So I'm just wondering. So in this pandemic, you have to produce a show. It's 5 days a week. A lot of work goes into producing it. How are you managing doing this in a world where you've got to be super safe and you can't really be indoors? How are you going about producing the show during a pandemic?
Well, one thing I'm really proud of is, when Hollywood shut down and all of these other big productions shut down, we never stopped producing at Chronicle. We slowed, certainly, but we never stopped. And that's something that I'm very proud of. Maybe that attributes to some of the growth because there wasn't much else on TV and we were still producing new content. We always told people our safety protocols, and if they were uncomfortable, we interviewed them over Zoom. And if they were comfortable, most people actually were. We came into their homes masked, sanitizing things. I'm happy to say that in a year, we've only had, I don't think, one COVID case, and nothing. We haven't gotten any of our interviewees sick. We haven't gotten colleague to colleague transmission, which is great. And I think that, in television, I never thought that I would have a job where I could work from home, but we all are working from home. I only work from home 2 days a week, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then I go in the other days. So there's always one manager in the building. Our editors are there, but everybody else is remote. Producers, reporters, anchors. So social distancing and being safe is how we've managed to not only stay healthy, but also continue to produce content. We were down slightly from 2019 to 2020, but not as much as people would think, only 10%. So, and we did rely on repurposing some old material that we had and kind of restructuring some of it, turning old shows into more interactive shows where the audience could kind of vote for what we would show live during the show, utilizing your cell phone technology plus the television. I think that attributes to our growth to kind of getting the audience involved, producing content that they were looking for. We started a cooking at home show. So we had Boston chefs showing people how to bake some of their famous dishes at home. We did a DIY series where experts were showing people how to do simple home renovations. So we really started to think about what the viewer and the audience was looking for at that time. So hopefully that continues. We'll see.
That's great. Wow. And I can't believe we're out of time. This has been so delightful. I've so enjoyed this conversation with you. Thank you so much, Nneka, for the work that you do and for your time with us today. And now I'm going to send this back to Celia for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Nneka. I think to bring it back all the way to the beginning when both of you were talking about your parents, I'm personally really glad you both became journalists and didn't give up on that. It's been wonderful listening to you talk. It's like watching, friends have a conversation. It's been great. So thank you. Thank you again to Rosa and MFS for sponsoring the Women's Network and this great program today. And the next one in our series will be on March 18th, featuring the head of innovation for Johnson & Johnson. So we hope to see you then. And with that, signing off and have a great day. Thank you so much.